Okay, so today I'm just going to read a little book, and this is mostly for myself to listen to. Chapter 1. Introduction. Stab, stab, stab. If you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. If you talk to him in his language, that goes to his heart. Nelson Mandela. Second quote. That's not what it says. Americans who travel abroad for the first time are often shocked to discover that, despite all the progress that has been made in the last 30 years, many foreign people still speak in foreign languages. And that quote is by Dave Barry. Language learning is a sport. I say this as someone who is in no way qualified to speak about sports. I joined the fencing team in high school in order to get out of gym class. Still, stabbing friends with pointy metal objects resembles language learning more than you might think. Your goal in fencing is to stab people automatically. You spend time learning the names of the weapons and the rules of the game, and you drill the proper posture, every parry, riposte, and lunge. Dang, I can't even read in English. Finally, you play the game, hoping to reach that magical moment when you forget about the rules. Your arms move of its own accord, and you deftly parry your friend's sword, and you stab him squarely in the chest. Point! We want to walk up to someone, open our mouths, forget the rules, and speak automatically. This goal can seem out of reach because languages seem hard, but they're not. There is no such thing as a hard language. Any idiot can speak whatever language his parents spoke when he was a child. The real challenge lies in finding a path that conforms to the demands of a busy life. In the midst of my own busy life as an opera singer, oh, that's cool, I needed to learn German, Italian, French, and Russian. Out of those experiences, I found the underpinnings for this book. My methods are the results of an obsessive need to tinker, research, and tinker again. My language learning toolbox has, over time, turned into a well-oiled machine that transforms fixed amounts of daily time into noticeable, continuous improvement in my languages and in the languages of every person I've taught. In sharing it, I hope to enable you to visit the peculiar world of language learning. In the process, you'll better understand the inner workings of your mind and the minds of others. You'll learn to speak a new language too. Okay, beginnings. So far, my favorite moment of this crazy language learning adventure took place in a Viennese? What? Viennese? Okay. Adventure took place in a Viennese subway station in 2012. I was returning home from a show when I saw a Russian colleague coming toward me. Our common language had always been German, and so in that language we greeted and caught up on the events of the past year. Then I dropped the bomb. You know, I speak Russian now, I told her in Russian. The expression on her face was priceless. Her jaw actually dropped, like in the cartoons. She stammered, "What? When? How?" As we launched into a long conversation in Russian about language learning, life, and the intersection between the two. My first attempts to learn languages were significantly less jaw-dropping. I went to Hebrew school for 7 years. We sang songs, learned the alphabet, lit lots of candles, drank lots of grape juice, and didn't learn much of anything. Well, except the alphabet. I had that alphabet nailed. In high school, I fell in love with my Russian teacher, Mrs. Nowakowski. She was smart and pretty. She had a wacky Russian last name, and I did whatever she asked, whenever she asked. 5 years later, I had learned a few phrases, memorized a few poems, and learned that alphabet quite well. Thank you very much. By the end of it, I got the impression that something was seriously wrong. Why can I only remember alphabets? Why was everything else so hard? Fast forward to June of 2004, at the start of a German immersion program for opera singers in Vermont. At the time, I was an engineer with an oversized singing habit. This habit demanded that I learn basic German, French, and Italian, and I decided that jumping into the pool was the only way I'd ever succeed. Upon my arrival, I was to sing a paper pledging to use German as my only form. Upon my arrival, I was to sign a paper pledging to use German as my only form of communication for 7 weeks, under threat of expulsion without refund. At the time, this seemed unwise, as I didn't speak a word of German. I signed it anyway. Afterwards, some advanced students approached me, smiled, and said, "Hallo, hallo." I stared at them blankly for a moment and replied, "Hallo." We shook hands. 5 insane weeks later, I sang my heart out in a German acting class, found a remote location on campus, and stealthily called my girlfriend. "I think I'm going to be an opera singer," I told her in whispered English. On that day, I decided to become fluent in the languages demanded by my new profession. I went back to Middlebury College in Vermont and took German again. This time, I reached fluency. I moved to Austria for my master's studies. While living in Europe in 2008, I went to Perugia, Italy, to learn Italian. Perugia or Perugia? 2 years later, I became a cheater. Cheaters occasionally prosper. The 3 keys to language learning. This book would not exist if I had not cheated on the French test. I'm not proud of it, but there it is. First, some background. The Middlebury Language Schools offer 5 levels of classes: absolute beginner, false beginner, people who have forgotten what they've learned. Oh, that's smart to do that. Intermediate, advanced, and near fluent. At the time of the test, I was an absolute beginner in French, but I had already learned a Romance language, and I wanted to be with the false beginners. So, for my 3rd stint at Middlebury, I cheated on the online placement test using Google Translate and some grammar websites. Don't tell Middlebury. I mean, you just put it in a book, so. A month later, I received my regrettable status. "Welcome and congratulations," it began. "You have been placed in the intermediate level." S-word. I had 3 months to learn a year's worth of French or look like an idiot at the entrance interview. These interviews are serious business. You sit in a room with a real live French person, you chat for 15 minutes about life, and you leave with a final class placement. You can't cheat. You can either speak French or make sad faces and wave your hands around like a second-rate Parisian mime. As I was in the middle of completing master's degrees in opera and art song, the only free time I had was an hour on the subway every day and all day on Sundays. I frantically turned to the internet to figure out how to learn a language faster. What I found was surprising. There are a number of incredibly powerful language learning tools out there, but no single program put all of the new methods together. I encountered 3 basic keys to language learning. Learn pronunciation first. Don't translate. Use spaced repetition systems. What I found was surprising. There are a number of incredibly powerful language learning tools out there, but no single program put all of the new methods together. Learn pronunciation first. Don't translate. Use spaced repetition systems. Okay. The first key, learn pronunciation first, came out of my music conservatory training and is widely used by the military and the missionaries of the Mormon Church. Learn pronunciation first. My music conservatory training. Okay. Singers learn the pronunciation of languages first because we need to sing in these languages long before we have the time to learn them. In the course of mastering the sounds of a language, our ears become attuned to those sounds, making vocabulary acquisition, listening comprehension, and speaking come much more quickly. While we're at it, we pick up a snazzy, accurate accent. So learn pronunciation. That needs to be highlighted. Okay. What's next? The second key, don't translate, was hidden within my experiences at the Middlebury Language Schools in Vermont. Not only can a beginning student skip translating, but it was an essential step in learning how to think in a foreign language. It made language learning possible. This was the fatal flaw in my earlier attempts to learn Hebrew and Russian. I was practicing translation instead of speaking. By throwing away English, I could spend my time building fluency instead of decoding sentences word by word. The third key, use spaced repetition systems. SRSs came from language blogs and software developers. They are flashcards on steroids. Based upon your input, they create a custom study plan that drives information deep into your long-term memory. They supercharge memorization, and they have yet to reach mainstream use. A growing number of language learners on the internet were taking advantage of SRSs, but they were using them to memorize translations. Conversely, no translation proponents like Middlebury and Berlitz were using comparatively antiquated study methods, failing to take advantage of the new computerized learning tools. Meanwhile, nobody but the classical singers and the Mormons seemed to care much about pronunciation. I decided to use all of these methods at once. I used memorization software on my smartphone to get the French into my head, and I made sure that none of my flashcards had a word of English on them. I began making flashcards for the pronunciation rules, added a bunch of pictures for the nouns and some verbs, learned the verb conjugations, and then built up to simple French definitions of more abstract concepts. By June, in my hour a day on the subway, I had learned 3,000 words and grammar concepts. When I arrived at Middlebury, I waited in the room for my interview in French. This interview was meant to ensure that I hadn't done anything stupid like cheat on my online placement test. It was the first time I had ever spoken French in my life. The teacher sat down and said, "Bonjour," and I "Bonjour, bonjour, bonjour," and I responded right back with the very first word that came into my brain, "Bonjour." So far, so good. As our conversation evolved, I was amazed to find that I knew all the words she was saying, and I knew all the words I needed to respond. I could think in French. It was halting, but it was French. I was stunned. Middlebury bumped me into the advanced class. In those 7 weeks, I read 10 books, wrote 70 pages worth of essays, and my vocabulary grew to 4,500 words. By the beginning of August, I was fluent in French. What the heck? That's crazy. The game plan. What is fluency? Each of us will find a different answer to this question. The term is imprecise, and it means a little less every time someone writes another book, article, or spam email with a title like, "You can be fluent in 7 days!" Exclamation point, 1 exclamation point. Still, we maintain an image of fluency in our minds. A summer afternoon in a Parisian cafe, casually chatting up the waitress without needing to worry about verb conjugations or missing words in our vocabularies. Beyond that cafe, we must decide individually how far we wish to go. I would confidently describe myself as fluent in German. I've lived in Austria for 6 years and will happily discuss anything with anyone, but I certainly need to dance around a few missing words to get out of a €200 fine for my rental car's broken gas cap. Apparently, the word for gas cap is tankadol, and the words for I don't give a D word if I'm the first person to drive this car. The spring holding the gas cap closed was defective. Start with that's something in German, and go on from there. You'll have to determine for yourself whether your image of fluency includes political discussions with friends, attending poetry readings, working as a secret agent, or lecturing on quantum physics at the Sorbonne. We struggle to reach any degree of fluency because there is so much to remember. The rule book of the language game is too long. We go to class that discuss the rule book. We struggle to reach any degree of fluency because there is so much to remember. The rule book of the language game is too long. We go to classes that discuss the rule book. We run drills about one rule or another, but we never get to play the game. One, on the off chance that we ever reach the end of a rule book, we've forgotten most of the beginning already. Moreover, we've ignored the other book, the vocabulary book, full of thousands upon thousands of words that are just as hard to remember as the rules. Forgetting is our greatest foe, and we need a plan to defeat it. What's the classic language learning success story? A guy moves to Spain, falls in love with a Spanish girl, and spends every waking hour practicing the language until he is fluent within the year. This is the immersion experience, and it defeats forgetting with brute force. In large part, our proud Spanish-speaking hero is successful because he never had any time to forget. Every day he swims in an ocean of Spanish. How could he forget what he had learned? I learned German in this way. Given an opportunity to leave my job, move to Vermont, and cut off all ties to the English-speaking world for 2 full summers. Immersion is a wonderful experience, but if you have steady work, a dog, a family, or a bank account in need of refilling, you can't readily drop everything and devote that much of your life to learning a language. We need a more practical way to get the right information into our heads and prevent it from leaking out of our ears. I'm going to show you how to stop forgetting so you can get to the actual game. And I'm going to show you what to remember so that once you start playing the game, you're good at it. Along the way, we'll rewire your ears to hear new sounds and rewire your tongue to master a new accent. We'll investigate the makeup of words, how grammar assembles those words into thoughts, and how to make those thoughts come out of your mouth without needing to waste time translating. We'll make the most of your limited time investigating which words to learn first, how to use mnemonics to memorize abstract concepts faster, and how to improve your reading, writing, listening, and speaking skills as quickly and effectively as possible. I want you to understand how to use the tools I found along the way, but I also want you to understand why they work. Language learning is one of the most intensely personal journeys you can undertake. You are going into your own mind and altering the way you think. If you're going to spend months or years working at that goal, you'll need to believe in these methods and make them your own. If you know how to approach the language game, you can beat it. I hope to show you the shortest path to that goal so that you can forget the rules and start playing already. After I learned German, I thought, what does that mean? If I could just go back in time and tell myself a few things, I would have had a much easier time with this language. I had precisely the same thought after Italian, French, Russian, which I finally learned in 2012, and Hungarian, 2013's project. This book is my time machine. If I squint my eyes just right, then you are monolingual me from 9 years ago. Okay. And I'm creating a time paradox by helping you avoid all the pitfalls and potholes that led me to make my time machine in the first place. You know how it is. How long does fluency take? To estimate the time we'll need to consider your fluency goals. The languages you already know, the language you're learning, and your daily time constraints. As I said earlier, there is no such thing as a hard language. There are, however, languages that will be harder for you to learn because they aren't in the same family as the languages you already know. Japanese is difficult for English speakers to learn for the same reason that English is difficult for Japanese speakers. There are precious few words and grammatical concepts that overlap in both languages, not to mention the entire different alphabets involved. In contrast, an English speaker learning French has much less work to do. English vocabulary is 28% French and 28% Latin. As soon as an English speaker learns proper French pronunciation, he already knows thousands of words. Okay. The U.S. Foreign Service Institute ranks languages by their approximate difficulty for native English speakers. In my experience, their estimates are spot on, as they predicted Russian, a level 2 language, took me nearly twice as much time as French, a level 1 language. and I suspect that Japanese, a level 3 language, will take me twice as much time as Russian. I reached a comfortable intermediate. I can think in French and use a monolingual dictionary level in 3 months. Working for an hour a day plus weekend binges, and a similar level for Russian in 6 months at 30 to 45 minutes a day plus weekend binges. Then I used 7 to 8 weeks of intensive immersion to bring both of those languages to advanced comfortable in a cafe. Then I used 7 to 8 weeks of intensive immersion. Okay. Comfortable chatting about whatever. Somewhat uncomfortable describing car problems. Levels. I've seen similar results with my students. Without any immersion program, I suspect advanced French would take 5 to 8 months. Working for 30 to 45 minutes per day on your own. Okay, we're gonna highlight that. Okay. Level 2 languages like Russian and Hebrew should be twice that. And level 3 languages like Chinese, Arabic, Japanese, and Korean should take 4 times as long as French. That's like 3 years. Unless you go up on the amount of time that you work on it every day. Okay. These harder languages do take time, but there's no reason you can't learn them. You've already met the only prerequisite. You're interested. Think about exercise for a moment. To succeed in an exercise routine, we need to enjoy it or we'll drop it. Most of us don't have six-pack abs or fit into a size 2 dress. I've certainly tried for the abs. I gave up on the size 2 dress long ago. But I never succeeded because I rarely enjoyed exercise. Those of us who do succeed, successful gym rats, learn to find the joy and endorphins in grueling daily workouts. The rest of us can push ourselves into the gym with willpower, but if we don't find it enjoyable, we're unlikely to continue for the 6 to 24 months we need to see results. Yep, and that analogy perfectly makes sense because I'm one of those people who I would go to the gym with my friends and they seemed like they were enjoying it and they were actually getting results. But I hated going to the gym. But once I started working out at home and just using YouTube, I started seeing results in myself. So you just have to change things to make them work for you, basically. Okay. Next part, fitness. Fitness plans keep shrinking in time. 30-minute fitness, the 10-minute solution, ultimate physical fitness in 5 minutes, the 3-minute workout, in an attempt to make something that's difficult seem more palatable. But no matter what, we're still going to be a sweaty, achy mess at the end of it. And getting ourselves fired up to do it every day is hard in the short term and harder in the long term. As long as language learning is hard, we'll run into the same problems. Who enjoys drilling grammar and memorizing word lists? Even if I promise you fluency in 30 seconds a day, you're going to have a hard time sticking to it if it's unpleasant. Okay, next part. We're going to drop the boring stuff and find something more exciting. The tools I've assembled here are effective. Much more important, they're fun to use. We enjoy learning. It's what addicts us to reading newspapers, books, and magazines and browsing websites like Lifehacker, Facebook, Reddit, and the Huffington Post. Every time we see a new factoid, for example, in AD 536, a dust cloud blotted out the sun over Europe and Asia for an entire year, causing famines that wiped out populations from Scandinavia to China. What? No one knows what caused it. The pleasure centers of our brains burst into activity, and we click on the next link. In this book, we're going to addict ourselves to language learning. The discovery process for new words and grammar will be our new Facebook. The assembly process for new flashcards will be a series of quick arts and crafts projects, and the memorization process will be a fast-paced video game that's just challenging enough to keep us interested. There's no coincidence here. We learn better when we're having fun. And in looking for the fastest ways to learn, I naturally ended up with the most enjoyable methods. My favorite thing about language learning is this. I can basically play video games as much as I like without suffering deep existential regret afterwards. For example, I can't believe I just wasted 6 hours of my life playing stupid games on Facebook. I spend 30 to 60 minutes a day playing on my smartphone or watching TV. The TV series Lost is awesome in Russian. I spend 30 to 60 minutes a day. I get a language out of it, I feel productive, and I have fun. What's not to like? Let's learn how to play. Do this now, the path forward. An organizational note. Over the course of this book, I'm going to introduce you to a lot of tools and resources. If you ever forget which one is which, you'll find them all in the glossary of tools and terms at the end of this book. Oh, that's very nice of him, or her, whoever wrote this. I think it was a him. Along with a brief explanation. With that said, let's get started. I intend to teach you how to learn rather than what to learn. We can't discuss every word, grammatical system, and pronunciation system that exists, so you'll need some additional resources specific to your language of choice. Speaking of which, you should probably begin by choosing a language to learn. I've chosen my language, and then it's going to be Brazilian Portuguese. Choose a language based upon employment opportunities, difficulty, availability of resources, or a number of speakers. But in the end, choose a language that you like. A reader on my website once asked me whether he should learn Russian or French. His relatives spoke Russian. He loved the culture, but he was worried about that difficulty. French seemed like a safe alternative. Never settle for safe when you can have fun instead. Your language will become a constant companion living in your head. If you like your language, then you'll have fun studying it. And when you have fun, you learn faster. You have many resources at your disposal. Language books. Get yourself some books. Someone sat down and spent months or years, heaven forbid, organizing the information you need, and you can have all of that effort in the palm of your hand for $15 to $25. In Appendix 1, I list my favorite picks for the top 11 languages you're most likely to be studying. If your language isn't there, go to my website, fluentforever.com. I aim to have book recommendations for as many languages as people want to learn. Ooh. Jeez, how do audiobookers do it? Get these now. A good grammar book will walk you through your language's grammar in a thoughtful, step-by-step manner. On the way, it will introduce you to 1,000 words or so, give you a bunch of examples and exercises, and provide you with an answer key. You will skip 90% of the exercises in the book, but having them around will save you a lot of time once we begin to learn grammar. If the book gives you Englishy pronunciation for each word, bonjour. What? I give you permission to burn it and find a different one. That's funny. Walking into a Parisian cafe and saying bonjour is a good way to get ignored indefinitely by the waiter. If your new book comes with a CD, then so much better. Then so much the better. There are 2 pitfalls here to avoid. First, avoid books systematically detailing every single solitary rule and detail and exception all at once in an uncontrollable torrent of grammatical despair. I used to love these books until I tried learning from them. These are technical tomes that lay out the entire grammatical system of a language in giant flowcharts. They're lovely reference manuals, but are very difficult to use in a step-by-step manner. Second, by weary of most classroom books, especially those without an answer key, books designed for classrooms are often sparse on explanations because they expect that the teacher will be able to handle any confusion. You'll often have more luck with a self-study book. Oh, that's smart. I never thought about that. Okay. A phrase book is a wonderful reference as it's difficult to find handy phrases like "Am I under arrest?" and "Where are you taking me?" in a dictionary. Phrase books from the Lonely Planet Company are cheap and come with a tiny, extremely practical What was the last sentence? Oh, phrase books from the Lonely Planet Company are cheap and come with a tiny, extremely practical dictionary in the back. We'll use this dictionary when we learn our first words because it's a lot easier and faster to skim through than a real dictionary. This dictionary when we learn our first words. It's a lot easier to have Okay. We'll grudgingly allow bonjour here, but only because there are no phrase books without it. Consider these. A frequency dictionary typically contains the most important 5,000 words of your target language, arranged in order of frequency. The number one word in English, the, shows up once every 25 words. These books are amazing with lovingly picked examples and translations. They'll save you tons of time and they take so much work to compile that we should be throwing money and flowers at the feet of their authors. There are some online frequency lists, but they're not as good as the paper versions. Frequency dictionaries don't exist in every language yet, but if your language has one, you win. Get it. A pronunciation guide will walk you through the entire pronunciation system of your language, with the help of recordings and diagrams of your mouth and tongue. For many languages, you can find guidebooks with CDs devoted entirely to pronunciation. They're wonderful resources and well worth the purchase. In addition, I've made it my personal mission to develop computerized pronunciation trainers in as many languages as I can. These trainers can do a few neat things that textbooks can't, and we'll discuss them in depth in Chapter 3. You won't be able to find a guidebook or trainer in every language, but when they exist, they're extraordinarily helpful. You also want to find 2 dictionaries. It is up to you whether you find them online or in print. The first is a traditional bilingual dictionary. For example, English-French or French-English, with accurate pronunciation listed for every word. Again, if you see bonjour, burn it. If you see funny symbols, keep it. We'll make friends with the International Phonetic Alphabet in Chapter 3. The second is a monolingual dictionary. For example, French, which has actual definitions in French rather than translations. You'll never see bonjour in one of those, so don't worry about finding your lighter. You may also want a thematic vocabulary book. These books arrange the words in your language by theme. Words about cars, words for food, medical words, and so on. They're handy for customizing your vocabulary. We'll talk about them in detail in Chapter 6. For the intermediates. Yes, this is what I need. Thank goodness. For the intermediates, if you've already spent some time studying your target language, adjust your shopping list as follows. First, if you already have a grammar book, let me bookmark this page. No, how do I bookmark it? This used to be so easy. X-ray, notes about this book, about the author, share. No, I literally just want to bookmark this page. Oh, okay. Okay, cool. Okay, first, if you already have a grammar book, make sure that you actually like it and that it's sufficiently challenging. If not, get a new one that fits your level. Second, if you don't have a phrase book, they're worth having. Even if you're already reading books in your target language, you might not know how to ask about business hours or rental car insurance. A phrase book will let you look up sentences for many day-to-day situations that don't show up in books. Third, you probably don't have a frequency dictionary yet, and you'll use it much earlier than a beginner. Go get one. Last, hold off on a pronunciation book or trainer until the end of Chapter 3. You'll have a better idea then as to whether you'll need one. The Internet. The Internet is filling up with free grammar guides, pronunciation guides, frequency lists, and dictionaries of all shapes and sizes. The quality varies drastically from site to site and changes daily. You can learn a language for free on the net, but you'll be able to do it faster if you combine the best internet resources with well-written books. I list my favorite internet resources on my website, fluentforever.com/language-resources. And we'll be discussing the most important websites, Google Images, and the new language exchange communities. For example, Lang8, italki, Verbling throughout this book. Tutors and programs. If you need faster results and have some funds to spare, you can speed up your learning with private tutors who are extremely affordable at italki, or intensive programs at home and abroad. The fastest route. Jeez. The fastest route to fluency is also the least convenient. Intensive immersion programs will provide 20 plus weekly hours of class time. 10 to 20 weekly hours of homework, and a strict no English policy. You'll leave with a comfortable proficiency in your language of choice in exchange for 2 months of your life and a wad of cash. Some of them have generous financial aid policies, if you apply early enough, so they may be within your reach if you lack the funds but have the time. Language classes. In this book, we're going to discuss the process of learning a language on your own outside of the classroom. But if you're already enrolled in a class, or if there are some good affordable classes offered nearby, then be sure to check out Appendix 6, How to Use This Book with Your Classroom Language Course. The path forward. In the coming pages, we will knock down languages challenges one by one. I'll introduce you to a memorization system that will allow you to remember thousands of facts effortlessly and permanently. Then we'll determine which facts to learn. I'll guide you step by step through your language's sounds, words, and grammar. Every step of the way, we'll use your memorization system to learn more rapidly. Finally, we'll develop your listening and reading comprehension as we pave a path toward fluent speech. Along the way, I'll show you all of my favorite toys. I like finding ways to make life more efficient, even when finding a faster way to do something takes more time than simply doing it. Someday, the month I spent memorizing 100 composers' birth dates and death dates will pay off in time savings, but it hasn't quite yet. When it comes to efficiency and language learning, I got lucky. I needed to learn 4 languages to fluency for my singing. Beyond these, I want to learn Yiddish, Hebrew, and Hungarian to speak with my relatives, and I'm fascinated by Japanese. With so many languages to learn, I could spend an enormous amount of time looking for efficiency and still justify the time expense. As a result, I have a chest full of neat tools and toys to play with. We'll begin with my favorite one, the Space Repetition System, SRS. Chapter 2. Upload. 5 principles to end forgetting. A man's real possession is his memory. In nothing else is he rich, in nothing else is he poor. And that quote was written by Alexander Smith. Excuse me. A scene from The Matrix, Warner Brothers, Pictures 1999. Tank smiles as he sits down in his operator's chair, flipping through several discs. He picks one and puts it onto his computer. Neo looks at the screen. Jiu-jitsu. I'm going to learn jiu-jitsu? Smiling, Tank presses the load button. Neo's body jumps against the harness as his eyes clamp shut. The monitors kick wildly as his heart pounds, adrenaline surges, and his brain sizzles. An instant later, his eyes snap open. Neo, holy S-word. Tank grins. While we can't yet upload jiu-jitsu directly onto our brains, we do have technology that can help us learn faster. This technology derives its power from 5 principles of memory. Make memories more memorable. Maximize laziness. Don't review, recall. Wait, don't tell me. Rewrite the past. These principles will enable you to remember more in less time. Combined, they form a system that can insert thousands of words and grammar rules so deeply into your mind that you'll be able to recall them instantly. Most attractively, this system can take what little spare time you have and steadily turn it into a usable foreign language. Principle number 1, make memories more memorable. Any fact becomes important when it's connected to another. And that's written by Umberto Eco. To learn to remember, we must learn about the nature and location of memory. Scientists working in the 1940s and 50s began their search for memory in the most obvious place. Within the cells of our brains. Within the cells of our brains are neurons. They cut out parts of rats' brains, trying to make them forget a maze, and found that it didn't matter what part of the brain they chose. The rats never forgot. They cut out rats' brains? Okay. In 1950, the researchers gave up, concluding that they had most definitely searched everywhere and that memory must be somewhere else. Researchers eventually turned their search for memories to the wiring between neurons rather than within the cells themselves. Each of the 100 billion neurons in our brains are on average connected to 7,000 other neurons in a dense web of more than 150,000 kilometers of nerve fibers. These interconnected webs are intricately involved in our memories, which is why scientists could never find the mazes in their rats. Each rat's maze was spread throughout his brain. Whenever the scientists cut out a piece, they damaged only a small portion of the involved connections. The more they removed, the longer it took the rats to remember, but they never forgot their maze completely. The only way to remember the maze entirely was to remove the rat entirely. Oh no, this says the only way to remove the maze entirely was to remove the rat entirely. Okay, so the sun just went down a little bit, so that is fine. I think it's still nicely lit. These patterns of connections form in an elegantly simple mechanical process. Neurons that fire together wire together, known as Hebb's law. This principle helps explain how we remember anything. Take my first memory of cookies. I spent 10 minutes waiting in front of the oven, bathed in radiant heat and the scent of butter, flour, and sugar. What? I spent 10 minutes waiting in front of the oven, bathed in radiant heat. Okay. I waited until they came out of the oven and watched the steam rise up off of them as they cooled. When I could bear no more, my father gave me a glass of milk. I grabbed a cookie and I learned empathy for my poor blue friend from Sesame Street. My neural network for cookies involves sight, smell, and taste. There are audio components, the sound of the word cookie, and the sound of milk pouring into a glass. I remember my dad's face smiling as he bit into his own delicious cookie. This first cookie experience was a parade of sensations, which wired together into a tight web of neural connections. These connections enable me to return to my past whenever I encounter a new cookie. Faced with a familiar buttery scent, the old web of neurons reactivates. My brain plays back the same sights, sounds, emotions, and tastes, and I relive my childhood experience. Compare this experience to a new one. You're currently forming memory of the word mesure. There's not much of a parade here. It's not obvious how to pronounce it, and in a particularly obnoxious move, I'm not even telling you what it means. As a result, you're stuck looking at the structure of the word. It has 2 foreign letters, sandwiched between 4 familiar ones, and not much else. Without Herculean efforts, you will forget mesure by the end of this chapter, if not sooner. I want to know what it means. Levels of processing. The great mnemonic filter. The divide that separates your new mesure from cookie is known as levels of processing, and it separates the memorable from the forgettable. My cookie is memorable because it contains so many connections. I can access cookie in 1,000 different ways. I will remember cookies if I read about them, hear about them, see them, smell them, or taste them. The word is unforgettable. We need to make your mesure just as unforgettable, and we will do it by adding 4 types of connections: structure, sound, concept, and personal connection. These are the 4 levels of processing. They were identified in the 1970s by psychologists who created a curious questionnaire with 4 types of questions and gave it to college students. How many capital letters are in the word bear? Does apple rhyme with Snapple? Oh wait, structure. How many capital letters are in the word bear? Sound. Does apple rhyme with Snapple? Concept. Is tool another word for instrument? Personal connection. Do you like pizza? After the questionnaire, they gave the students a surprise memory test, asking which words from the test they still remembered. Their memories were dramatically influenced by the question types. Students remembered 6 pizzas for every bear. The magic of these questions lies in a peculiar mental trick. To count the capital letters in bear, you don't need to think about brown furry animals, and so you don't. You've activated the shallowest level of processing, structure, and moved on. On the other hand, you activate regions throughout your brain to determine whether you like pizza. You automatically utilize structure to figure out what word you're looking at. At the same time, you'll tend to hear the word pizza echoing within your skull as you imagine a hot disk of cheesy goodness. Finally, you'll access memories of pizza's past to determine whether you enjoy pizza or just haven't met the right one yet. In a fraction of a second, a simple question, do you like pizza, can simultaneously activate all 4 levels of processing. These 4 levels will wire together, and form a robust memory that is 6 times easier to remember than that bear you've already forgotten. The 4 levels of processing are more than a biological quirk. They act as a filter, protecting us from information overload. We live in a sea of information surrounded by a dizzying amount of input from TV, the internet, books, social interactions, and events of our lives. Your brain uses levels of processing to judge which input is important and which should be thrown out. You don't want to be thinking about the number of letters in the word tiger when one is chasing after you, nor do you want to be assaulted by vivid memories of cows when you buy milk. To keep you sane, your brain consistently works at the shallowest level of processing needed to get the job done. At the grocery store, you are simply looking for the words chocolate milk, or perhaps even organic, wholesome, happy cow chocolate milk. This is pattern matching, and your brain uses structure to quickly read through hundreds or thousands of ingredients lists and food labels. Thankfully, you forget nearly every one of these lists and labels by the time you reach your milk. If you didn't, your encyclopedic knowledge of supermarket brand names would make you a terrible bore at parties. In more stimulating circumstances, such as that tiger in hot pursuit, your brain has a vested interest in memory. In such a case, should you survive, you'll likely remember not to climb into the tiger enclosure at the zoo. In this way, levels of processing act as our great mental filter, keeping us alive and tolerable at parties. This filter is one of the reasons why foreign words are difficult to remember. Your brain is just doing its job now. How should it know that you want to remember bonjour but not disodium phosphate and emulsifier in your chocolate milk? Okay, next part. How to remember a foreign word forever. To create a robust memory for a word like bonjour, you'll need all 4 levels of processing. The shallowest level, structure, allows you to recognize patterns of letters and determine whether a word is long, short, and written in English or Japanese. Your brain is recognizing structure when you unscramble octor into doctor. This level is essential for reading, but it involves too little of your brain to contribute much to memory. Almost none of the students in the levels of processing study remembered counting the capital letters in bear. Words like mju are difficult to remember because you can't get any deeper than structure until you know how to deal with odd letters like O and O. Those are different symbols and I don't really know what they are. Your first task in language learning is to reach the next level, sound. Sound connects structure to your ears and your mouth and allows you to speak. You'll start by learning the sounds of your language and which letters make those sounds. Because if you begin with sound, you'll have a much easier time remembering words. Our college students remembered twice as many apples, which do in fact rhyme with Snapple, as they did bears, which has 4 capital letters. Sound is the land of rote memorization. We take a name like Edward or a pair of words like cat, gato, and we repeat them, continuously activating the parts of our brain that connect structure to sound. Our merger is roughly pronounced mulder. And the more accurately we learn its pronunciation, the better we'll remember it. Eventually, our mulder will be as memorable as a familiar name like Edward. This is better than structure, but it still isn't good enough for our needs. After all, many of us don't remember names very well, because our brains are filtering them out as quickly as they arrive. We need a way to get through this filter, and we'll find it at the third level of processing, concepts. Our college students remembered twice as many tools as apples. Synonym for instruments as apples or snapples. Concepts can be broken down into groups, abstract, and concrete. We'll begin with the abstract. If I tell you that my birthday is in June, you probably won't immediately see images of birthday cakes and party hats. You don't need to. And as we've discussed, our brains work at the shallowest level required. It's efficient and it saves us a lot of work and distraction. Still, the date of my birthday is a meaningful, if abstract, concept. This makes it deeper and more memorable than pure sounds, which is why you'll have an easier time remembering that my birthday is in June, and you'll have remembering that the Basque word for birthday is no, I cannot say that. Deeper still than abstract concepts are concrete, multisensory concepts. If I tell you that my upcoming Deeper still than abstract concepts are concrete, multisensory concepts. If I tell you that my upcoming birthday party will take place in a paintball arena, after which we'll eat a cookies and cream ice cream cake and then spend the rest of the evening in a swimming pool, you'll tend to remember those details much better than you'll remember the month of the event. We prioritize and store concrete concepts because they engage more of our brains, not because they're necessarily any more important than other information. In this case, it is less important that you know the details about my birthday than that you know when and where to show up. Given this phenomenon, how do we make a strange foreign word like mother memorable? The word itself is not the problem. We are not bad at remembering words when they are tied to concrete, multisensory experiences. If I tell you that my email password is Muller, you probably, hopefully, won't remember it, because you're processing it on a sound and structural level. But if we're in a bar together, and I hand you a flaming drink with a dead snake in it and tell you, this is Muller, you drink, you won't have any trouble remembering that word. We have no problem naming things. Nouns comprise the vast majority of the 450,000 entries in Webster's Third International Dictionary. It's when those names aren't tied to concrete concepts that we run into trouble with our memories. Our goal, and one of the core goals of this book, is to make foreign words like Muller more concrete and meaningful. Breaking through the filter, the power of images and personal connections. Let's see. Earlier in this chapter, we encountered a translated word pair, cat and gato. As we discussed, standard study practice involves repeating gato and cat until they form a sound connection. This is too shallow to remember easily, but it's also beside the point. When you read gato, you don't want to think the word cat. You want to think this. And then he shows like a picture of a cat, which is yes, exactly. We'll get better results if we skip the English word and use an image instead. We recall images much better than words because we automatically think conceptually when we see an image. Image recall studies have repeatedly demonstrated that our visual memory is phenomenal. Memory researchers in the 1960s subjected college students to one of the most terrifyingly named memory tests ever invented, the two-alternative forced choice test. In it, college students were shown 612 magazine ads possibly tied to chairs with their eyes held open, and then asked to identify the old pictures when shown a mixture of images. The students correctly picked the old images 98.5% of the time. Unsatisfied, the researchers repeated their tests with more images, trying to determine what college students will put up with for low pay and free food. There doesn't seem to be a limit. Students are willing to sit in dark rooms for 5 consecutive days, watching 10,000 images in a row. After the study, these students accurately identified 83% of images. Our capacity for visual memory is extraordinary, and we only need to learn how to take advantage of it. Since we need to learn words, not pictures, we will use combinations of words and pictures. Such combinations work even better than pictures alone. This effect even applies to totally unrelated images. You remember in an abstract drawing with the sentences, "Apples are delicious." Better than that drawing alone. Faced with an incomprehensible image, is that what that says? Faced with an incomprehensible image and an unrelated word, your brain struggles to find meaning, even if there isn't any. In the process, it automatically moves the word out of the disodium phosphate trash can and into cookie territory. As a result, you remember that. He shows a picture. We can go one step deeper than pictures by taking advantage of the last level, personal connection. You will remember a concept with a personal connection 50% more easily than a concept without one, which is why our college students remember 50% more pizza, yes, we like them, than tools, yes, they are synonymous with instruments. This is not to say that concepts alone are ineffective. If you connect gato to a picture of some cute cat, you will have an easy time remembering that word. But if in addition you can connect gato with a memory of your own childhood cat, that word will become practically unforgettable. How do we use this in practice? A new foreign word is like a new friend's name. Our new friend could be a person, a cat, or a drink. The memory burden in each case is the same. Let's make a new friend's name memorable using levels of processing. Our new friend is named Edward. Simply by thinking Edward, we have already reached the second level of processing, sound. If we want to go deeper into concept territory, we would search for a concrete image for the name Edward, such as the movie character Edward Scissorhands. If we spend a moment imagining our new friend with a pair of scissors for hands, we would have an easy time remembering his name later. This strategy is used by competitive memorizers. Yes, there are competitive memorizers to quickly memorize people's names, and we'll discuss it in depth in chapters 4 and 5. But we're not done yet. We'll do even better if we can find a personal connection with his name. Perhaps you still remember watching Edward Scissorhands in a theater. Perhaps your brother is named Edward, or perhaps you too have hands made of scissors. As you imagine your new friend interacting with Edward-related images and Edward-related personal memories, you are activating broader and broader networks in your brain. The next time you see Edward, this parade of images and memories will come rushing back, and you'll be hard-pressed to forget his name. This gives you valuable social points, which are sometimes redeemable for wine, cheese, and board game nights. This thought process can take creativity, but you can learn to do it quickly and easily. For a concrete word like gato, you can find an appropriate image on Google Images within seconds. If you simply ask yourself, when's the last time I saw a gato? You will add a personal connection and cement your memory of the word easy. For an abstract word like economy, our job is still very simple. When we search on Google Images, we'll find thousands of pictures of money, piggy banks, stock markets, charts, and politicians. By choosing any of these images, we'll force ourselves to think concretely and conceptually. As a result, the word will become much easier to remember. If we ask ourselves whether the economia has affected our lives, we'll get the personal connection we needed to remember that word forever. In this book, we're going to learn vocabulary in 2 main stages. We'll build a foundation of easy, concrete words, and then we'll use that foundation to learn abstract. We'll build a foundation of easy, concrete words, and then we'll use that foundation to learn abstract words. Throughout, we'll use levels of processing to make foreign words memorable. Key points. Your brain is a sophisticated filter, which makes irrelevant information forgettable and meaningful information memorable. Foreign words tend to fall into the forgettable category because they sound odd. They don't seem particularly meaningful, and they don't have any connection to your own life experiences. You can get around this filter and make foreign words memorable by doing these 3 things. Learn the sound system of your language, number 1. Bind those sounds to images, number 2. And number 3, bind those images to your past experiences. Principle 2. Maximize laziness. I've heard that hard work never killed anyone, but I say, why take the chance? And that was said by Ronald Reagan. And that is the beginning of like another section. So I'm gonna stop here. Actually, I'll just read this first page. Okay. Forgetting is a formidable opponent. We owe our present understanding of forgetting to Hermann Ebbinghaus, a German psychologist who spent years of his life memorizing lists of nonsense syllables. He recorded the speed of forgetting by comparing the time it took him to learn, and then later we learned one of his lists. His forgetting curve is a triumph of experimental psychology, tenacity, and masochism. Okay, and that's it. So, cool.